G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today I need to talk about a lot of different topics, and, well, it's really just two topics actually. Warhammer the Old World announcement, and of course the Sisters of Battle releases, because I've gotten a lot of messages from people and a lot of comments on videos asking me to cover both of these things. So, here I am, and I'm going to cover both of these things. All of this is straight off the cuff, no script, no nothing like that, so I have no idea how long it's going to take. Maybe it's going to be a great video, maybe it's going to be terrible, I don't know. But anyway, let's get to it. First of all, Warhammer the Old World. So I watched the announcement little video with Tony Cottrell and that, and I was not blown away by it. So I'm going to get really cynical really early on in this video, and there'll be more positive thoughts on other things later, mostly positive with the sisters. But basically, I do not need the announcement of yet another game system from Forge World when they can't finish what they've already started. I'm fucking sick of this. This is an issue which is really coming to a head at this point, because there's just too many game systems. None of them are finished. Lots of them are lacking essential features. Finish the Horus Heresy, and then you can go Warhammer the Old World. You can create entirely new game systems for all I care. Finish what you fucking started. If every single project I started at work was like, hey, I'm going to make a mold for this, and I just stopped each mold halfway through, my company would get really shitty with me. Every time I started machining a piece of aluminium, then just stopped partway through and just said, oh, you know, I'll finish it down the track. Just have faith in me. The company really wouldn't like that if I did it all the time. And yet this is what Forge World's doing all the time. Yeah, we're working on Horus Heresy. Just trust us, we'll finish it later. Yeah, we're doing specials games. Just trust us, we'll finish it later. Not good enough. Not fucking good enough. Now, as for Warhammer the Old World overall, well, my personal feelings on Age of Sigmar I've never really made known, so good time to do that here. I don't really care for the lore in that world because it's pretty terrible. It's getting better as it gets fleshed out over time, but if they'd established it much better at the start, written it much better, it would really help with the transition, we'll put it that way. When you write something terrible and everyone knows that Age of Sigmar 1.0 on release was absolutely atrocious as a game. Now, a lot of people defended it at the time, oh no, it's a lot better than you think, and a lot of people, especially old Warhammer Fantasy players, were like, fuck this shit. I'm somewhere in the middle. Things like their gimmicky special rules they had, like, hey, you have a beard, you get to make rerolls for dwarves, shit like that, was dumb. Lack of points, dumb. The balancing and playtesting clearly just hadn't been a thing, clearly. So things like that, of course, pissed me off. But on the other hand, more dynamic sculpts look great. The miniatures mostly look great. There are two factions I dislike, and I've voiced that strongly. The Caradon Overlords, because instead of some really cool steampunk aesthetic that sort of would have built upon existing units like the Gyrocopter, and steam cannons and steam tanks from the old world of Warhammer, they went with just, they're powered by space magic. But dwarves don't use the magic themselves, just magical fuel. And that was dumb to me. And I was like, potential in the sculpt, but it missed the mark for me. But then there was the Adonath Deepkin, which is the other faction I really despise, where I'm like, this faction is atrocious. Some of the models are okay in the range, but overall I don't like the Adonath. They don't fit into this world. They fit into the world of Warcraft. But, that said, pretty much every other faction I like. I'm still mixed with how I feel about the Syrak Bone Reapers, or whatever they're called, the Bonecast Eternals, as I've heard it put. That faction I'm a bit iffy on. I like the Atlantean vibe going on with them. They look a bit like the Dead Atlantean body in Conan the Barbarian, the original 1982 film. Yeah, cool film. I'll have to do a commentary on that one day. But yeah, overall, really like most of Age of Sigmar's sculpts. But I've reiterated to several people in person that I felt they should have done a set of army books, a full comprehensive set of army books, and one last set of rules for Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Everything was on an even footing going forward. And then they could destroy the world as they liked, or parallel universe, the Age of Sigmar, something like that. People would have been happy with it, because then they would have gone, yep, great, we've got balanced, up-to-date lists for all of the army factions in Warhammer. That didn't happen. Instead, there was a very unbalanced and bad release with the End Times, which, after reading all the End Times books now, is fucking horrible. Done a couple of videos on it, and I will finish the series. It just takes a really long time to make those videos. The End Times was terrible. No balance, mixing and mashing factions together, like fucking small child holding two dolls and just going kiss and slapping the two dolls together. That was what the factions being pushed into one another in End Times felt like. Yeah, Dark Elves, High Elves, kiss! Yeah! It's fucking dumb. So if they'd released a full set of army books and a rulebook for a 9th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, left it all on an even footing, and then they killed that world and went off with Age of Sigmar, I think nowhere near as many people would have given a shit. Because they'd at least be catered for. Instead, you got people like Bretonnium players and Tomb Kings players, and they're like, hey, remember us? We're a thing. Yeah, no, they're not a thing anymore. Not to mention all their ranges being pulled by the company. I hardly think they were taking up that much space that they couldn't just be kept as a made-to-order, perhaps. Like, again, factory I work at, customers order products. Sometimes it might be a year or two between customers ordering the product. There, we just dig out the mold and cast it up for them when enough of that order accumulates. It's easy. But Games Workshop doesn't have that concept at the moment. They just go, fuck it, we can't be fucked producing it or keeping it in the mold or whatever, so it can just disappear. It's not great for the community. You have a lot of antipathy in the community towards Games Workshop for that decision. So instead of Age of Sigmar being a skirmish version of Warhammer Fantasy Battles that a lot of people who already played Warhammer could go and play, much like say Kill Teams is for 40k. People don't want to play a full game of 40k, they could play something that, small scale, that kind of thing. Well, they came up with basically 40k skin on a fantasy battle game, with Stormcast Eternals looking very much like Space Marines. And that quite rightly pissed off people who wanted their version of the game, because there's nothing else left like it for them. I totally understand that, and that's very much the opinion I hold. So, when I look across at this announcement for Warhammer the Old World, I'm like, well, it sounds like you're doing what you should have done back then, which is a final set of support for the game. But my problem with it is how are they going to handle this? They obviously can't use the Age of Sigmar sculpts. Many of them are too big and too dynamic. So take a look at your basic infantry. It's very, very hard to get basic infantry to fit onto, say, like 20mm bases are not going to be a thing. 25mm bases, maybe for the smaller units. They're the two main sizes of square base in old Warhammer Fantasy. 32mm bases definitely weren't a thing. 40mm was the next size up. You're not going to go around mounting Chaos Warriors on troll bases, are you? I don't know. So really hard to rank these things up and stick them together as a unit. I mean, I guess it has been done with things like the Blight Kings in End Times. But overall, yeah, so they can't really use the current ranges of Warhammer plastics. So whatever they do is either going to have to rely on making all new plastics for these factions, which is a huge amount of work, and therefore I don't see them having a large release, because, again, you need, let's say, 5 to 6 units, absolute bare minimum, plus general units for a game of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. A couple of different core options, usually a cavalry or war machine options, some sort of gargantuan option or monstrous creature option, that sort of thing. Dragons and Hell Cannons and Chaos Knights and Chaos Warriors, Chaos Marauders. Those are the sort of options you need. You need half a dozen units or so. If they're going to do that in plastic, that half a dozen units, they might have them for 2 factions, but look how long it takes for fucking Necromunda. Necromunda needs, maybe 110, 120 models to basically fill out all of Necromunda. By the time you've got your warbands, so let's say 10 different warbands, and then 20 different bounty hunters, special characters, that kind of thing. About 120 models, off the top of my head. to fill it out nicely, and then you can have, some ancillary stuff here and there. If it takes them, 3 years now with Necromunda, 2-3 years, something like that, to get 70 or 80 models out, do you think they're going to have sculpts in 3 years' time? That's what they're saying apparently, for Warhammer, the old world, to fill out factions? No, they won't. So the options are they either recycle existing miniatures, possible, not probable, because then they've got to pull out all these old models and they're a different design aesthetic to what they've got now. Won't be as easy for them to paint up, that kind of thing. I don't see them going that way. They may reimagine them. Now, again, if they reimagine them, how many of these factions do you think they're going to fulfill? I think you'd be lucky to get 2 on initial release. 2 factions. Maybe, say, Empire and Chaos, or Empire and Orcs, something like that. They'd be the sort of factions you get on release. It's like, well, if you get that faction on release, okay, how long is it going to be before that faction gets visited again and gets more stuff? If it gets a bunch of stuff at the start, that's fine. What happens with the next faction? How far away is that? 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years? What, are you going to tell me that not only are they going to fill out the lineup in Age of Sigmar and keep constant releases for that, constant releases 40k, they're also going to release a bunch of plastic stuff for Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and it's going to be consistently released, and they're going to be releasing a whole army at a time? I don't see it. So I'm very, very fucking cynical about Warhammer the Old World. The only thing it really has to offer is rules for existing stuff. Now, if we're going rules for existing stuff, why is this project going to take 3 years? Anyone? Anyone at all? Because frankly, it doesn't need to. Rule sets like 9th edition fantasy were out there. They were out there days after the release of Age of Sigmar from the community. You've got 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy as a starting off point. You have all the existing army books and you can tweak things and adjust things as required. It's not going to take 3 years to release the game. So the reason it's going to take this long is probably because Forge World just is literally in the planning stages right now. They've just come up with the idea, yeah, we're going to tackle the old world. Well, I'm sorry, but I just don't see it. How are you going to do it? What's the game plan here? Let me, as the consumer, in on this a bit. I mean, it's all very good and well to say, oh, it's going to be great, we're really going to support this game system. It's like, I want to know how you're going to get there. I mean, you've failed consistently to finish off all these other systems. Is it going to be like another Horus Heresy? Are you going to start it? It's going to be full of enthusiasm for the next 3 or 4 years. It's just going to be constant Warhammer the Old World releases. It's going to be like, oh, here's the Empire. Here's Chaos Warriors. Here is the Kislev as their own faction. Here is the Wood Elves. Here is the High Elves. And then you're going to get bored of it because something else is going to come along. Some other shiny project like, oh my god, I just realized we haven't done the War in Heavens for 40k yet. Let's go and do the War in Heaven instead. And they're going to drop all Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And the people are going, hey, my Tomb Kings haven't been updated yet. You promised 7 years ago we're going to get Tomb Kings rules. And Forge World's just going to be like, oh, yeah, it's coming. We're real keen for it, we're working on it, yada yada, fuck off. Because that's what they've done with the Horus Heresy. That's what they're doing with most of their fucking game systems. They just release the stuff they're really interested in. Like, fuck, what do we really care about doing? Oh, well, I want to punch out a bunch of units for, Blood Bowl. I like this faction here. They're really cool. Well, I want to punch out this stuff for Lord of the Rings. They're cool. What about this uncool faction over here, but actually has a big player base that loves it? Yeah, well, they're kind of uncool, We'll get to it, just, it's not a priority. We've got a lot on. Yeah. If this sounds super negative, it's because this is the exact thing the company has been doing for 10 years. So, I'm sorry if I'm not positive about it, but if we're going off prior history here, which is all we can go off, they have basically failed at every step in the process. We haven't even got to Epic yet. We haven't got to Battlefleet Gothic yet. We haven't got to Mordheim yet. All we've got is Necromunda, Blood Bowl, for some reason Aeronautica Imperialis, Epic Titanicus, Adeptus Titanicus, and basically it. 4 of the old school specialist games have come back. We haven't got Inquisitor back yet or anything like that. And it's taken them, what, 5 years roughly from when they announced specialist games are coming back to get this far? And if you added up all the models for all those games combined, I reckon you'd be lucky if you broke 300. All of those games combined. Aeronautica Imperialis, Adeptus Titanicus, Blood Bowl, and Necromunda. I reckon if you combined all those, yeah, probably 300 models. And, yeah. You're telling me they're going to support a large-scale fantasy battle game. It used to take 2 years for Games Workshop themselves to get around to doing a re-release for a faction, and a lot of the re-releases they would do for a faction in old-school Warhammer Fantasy was a bunch of existing stuff, plus usually 1 or 2 new units or new sculpts. The most comprehensive one I can remember recently was when they did the Wood Elves. When they did that, they introduced like new sculpts for the Eternal Guard and their mounted units and such, but even then, that was, like 10 years between updates for the Wood Elves, so honestly, Forge World is gonna fuck it up if the same people that have been running this show for the last 10 years are running this show. Sorry, it's the way it is. And I think my points are pretty valid here. But happy to debate them in the comments below. So let's move on to the Sisters. Overall, pretty positive about the Sisters. I think they look right. They're a reimagining of the original sculpts, which is great to see. They didn't try and make an entirely new faction to supplant the existing stuff like Primaris Marines, which is good. So let's have a look at some of these up close. This model is okay. It probably didn't need the giant nipple tassels that are going on there. It's fine. The standard Battle Sisters look great. One thing that is a bit annoying is the scale change. They are a lot taller, actually. They're taller than Marines now. Hard though that may be to believe. Why? They didn't need a scale change. The only thing I can think of is it's just a shameless cash grab to make people replace entire armies of existing medals and fine cast. Because I know the excuses now the community is going to come out with. I can feel it, guys. Because I've been in this for too fucking long. And the excuses will be, oh, well, you know, they couldn't work with such a small sculpt. The larger sculpt allows them to really explore their creativity. You know, the larger size allows them to have more detail. You know, the old sculpt size just really constrained the designer. It's like, yeah, I'm not seeing anything on this sister model right now that's better than the hand-sculpted in green stuff minis of the 90s from the original Sisters of Battle kits. So the biggest scale is not actually doing anything right now, apart from Games Workshop going, oh, well, fuck, you know, these new Sisters are different to your old ones. If you want it to look right, you better buy a new army. Better buy a new army. These helmets look great. The Sallet style of helmet, yeah, looks great. I think I like the old Eviscerators more, by far. This whole, I'm now wearing, clothing thing's a bit weird. Why not pants and boots? She's wearing like some sort of sandal. Okay, whatever. Looks fine. The Seraphim look great. I do believe the Seraphim's on a 32 or 40 mil base now, not the 25 mil base. In fact, I've got the feeling a lot of the Sisters are on 32 mil bases. Arco-Flagellant, yep, looks great. Looks fine. Interesting. So, we're going with the boys' haircuts here. It's fine, I guess. Have whatever haircut you like. Shave your head for all I care. Right. What else have we got? Ah, yes. Little Sisters of Battle Force here. Yeah, looks cool. Penitent engine. Yeah, they had dudes driving them as well as chicks in the old fluff. But I think when people think Sisters of Battle, they kind of expect the whole army, apart from a few missionaries or preachers, to be women. So, just a little bit strange. Seeing the dudes strapped in there. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. What else have we got? Oh yes, this is interesting. the abeyant looking thing here, the giant flying Aquila. That's weird as fuck. And I don't know that I like it. Because I do see it as like, okay, this is like a priest moving their pulpit into an actual battle. But I suppose they are the ecclesiarchy, but I'd imagine that'd more be some sort of like confessor or priest, much like how you've got Volkmar on his war altar in Age of Sigmar or Warhammer Fantasy Battles. That's the sort of character that should occupy this, not just a sister of battle in her power armor. Just seems a little strange to me, that's all, but I'm sure they'll come up with some bullshit reason as to why. Yeah, looks okay. The vehicles are, we'll say, interesting. What the fuck is this chick's head? She looks like she's got one of those skulls from the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the alien skulls. This big elongated dome at the back of her fucking skull. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, this looks good. Actually, on this miniature right now, you can actually see these real fine lines on the weapon itself. The silver has picked it out, and you can see a series of lines following the weapon from end to end of the weapon, diagonally top left to lower right. Those are the striations from the 3D printing process when they created these models in the computer. So they designed them in a computer, obviously, and print them out in a resin printer of some description. And you can actually see the lines on this model because the dry brushing they've done over the weapon, the dark silver, has actually picked out the lines. You can see a whole series of lines. Hopefully it captures it in the render when I do this final video. Yep, standard troops look fine. Look great. I stand by that. What else have we got here? Well, Spitler, again, you get some idea of the size of these. This base has to be a 40 or 50mm size base, easily, in order to fit a full model laying down on its back and with room to spare on either side of it. Looks okay. The doves imagery, I guess, is to fit in with the Saint Celestine they released in the Gathering Storm. It's fine. Okay. So they're taking on much more of a preacher aspect to the Sisters of Battle than previously. So the Sisters of Battle are a part of the ecclesiarchy, yes, but they weren't really preachers as such. Yes, they had faith and devotion and that kind of thing, but they were very much a military arm of the Inquisition. These people who are going around just saying prayers and waving fucking Bibles in people's faces, that's a different role within the faction. That was always the role of the confessors and the priests. And I sort of mentioned it before, but it's like they've just pushed them away out of the codex. Like, you no longer exist. I'm woman, hear me roar. I don't know. This is a nice model. This is quite a nice model, and I imagine it will make its way into many armies. Alright, what have we got here? Okay, so on the left we have Terry Crews as the President of the United States in Idiocracy. On the bottom right we have Gerard Depardieu in the Man in the Iron Mask. Like, these are some ugly, ugly, ugly models. The model itself, I guess, is okay. It's just the head is fucking horrible. Oh, gee. And yeah, like the Death Guard, but thankfully not to the same extent as the Death Guard. They're really upping the amount of inquisitorial iconography on them. So, you know, the Death Guard started to have constant symbols of Nurgle. Well, these guys have. They always had like inquisitorial symbols, but it was mostly just the fleur-de-lis. That's that little arrow with the two little squiggles coming out the side of it. You see on like the lower right one's chest, that's the fleur-de-lis. In the crest on the back of Terry Crews there, that's a fleur-de-lis symbol. It's a French symbol for like the French monarchy, blah blah blah. Anyway, that was their main symbol that popped up all over the army, along with the single eye on like the shoulder pads, the mark of the sigillite, and the Inquisition. For some reason now it's become the predominant bit of iconography and is making its way onto every single miniature, not just once, not just twice, but often thrice and more, as you can see. And the series of rosary beads going around the waist here, I don't like the look of, but the lower right, Gerard Depardieu, obliques from the Asterix film, the single beads works well, but the rows of triple beads does not. Personal opinion, of course. Here we get a close-up of the war altar. Yeah, I like it. I do like it. I think it's the wrong model in it. Not to say that it had to be a male, but I think it needs to be a person who's not in power armor. Someone who is literally like faith personified, some sort of priest or that kind of thing, leading it. If you want to go with this heavy female iconography, and for some reason a crucifix on the chest, perhaps go with something like a Joan of Arc type character. You could have a jet bike riding Sister of Battle, that kind of thing, because that would make a lot more sense going into battle than this fucking thing. This is a preaching platform. It should have a priest in it, not a Sisters of Battle canoness. And personal opinion, results may vary. Her eyes look weirdly far apart, but that's also part of the angle, which is taken from sort of 45 degrees, it looks like, from above. So it's causing the forehead and the chin to look closer than they are due to parallax error. And her eyes look a bit weird. I guess we'll call this model Tilda Swinton. What else have we got? The Saint and all that. Yeah, cool. We've seen that all before. Big box. I like how they say sprues are packed with extras. The problem is if those extras are designed for monopose or snap fit models, then you can't really fucking use them elsewhere because they won't go on any other fucking model unless you cut the fuck out of them and pin them and green stuff them. I can't believe that needs to be said, but I think it does need to be said for some people. Interesting. Let's see if I can find some pictures of these Sisters of Battle armoured vehicles. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through this at the moment, looking to find more because I wanted to talk about the vehicles, but I didn't find the post with them in, so I thought I'll keep looking and get started with the Horus Heresy audio. Hey, Get Started with the Horus Heresy is my copyrighted fucking intellectual property, you bastards. Give it back. I was selling your game for you because you weren't. Bastards. They're out here somewhere. Okay, I've lost track of it. But I know where there's pictures of their whole army, we can talk about them. So, in the background here, you can see the vehicles. Now, the good and the bad. The gigantic exhaust with big flaming braziers on top do nothing for me. The fleur-de-lis doors, however, look great. The little alcoves with the reliquies in them on the quarter ends of the vehicles look great as well. I don't mind the wrought iron fence as a dozer blade. But, Jesus, the gigantic stained glass window on like the immolator and that is, it's too over the top. Now, I know I'm saying this about 40k, but 40k was always over the top, but just that, it was like the extreme end of what was tolerable, I think. And that was the idea. It was like, it was crazy, but in the back of your mind, you're like, I suppose, maybe? This is taking the crazy to 11. Where it's like, no one is driving something covered in glass into battle where that glass is going to get hit by the first stray round and just shatter all over the poor person behind it. Defeats the fucking purpose of it. Why would you do that? And I'm not saying it doesn't look cool, but that's the sort of cool thing you need to reserve for, say, a scenic base of some description. Or a unit maybe which has a big force field in front of it. Not a fucking tank. Like, could you imagine taking an APC, like an M113, into battle with a giant fucking glass window on top of it? That would be insane. So, to see it here, the Sisters' tanks don't look terrible. They're just starting to suffer from a bit of the dial it up to 11 aspect, and a bit of the designer didn't know when to leave well enough alone. They're just adding a bit too much detail. They've just taken a few steps too far. When what Forge World had already done was plenty with, like, the Sisters of Battle upgrade kits. Also, the heavy bolter mounted in the front of the Rhino, I like it. But then the question becomes, why the fuck don't Marines have that? I mean, Rhinos are a Marine staple. What, they couldn't figure out how to fit one in? Oh, well, Sisters of Battle are smaller than Marines, even though these Sisters of Battle are larger than Marines. Yeah, again, those are 32mm bases, guys, not 25s. They're 40mm that the characters are on, 50 for that Abeyant-looking thing. These are not small models. These are not your old Sisters of Battle. And if they can fit in the front of that fucking Rhino with a heavy bolter, you damn sure bet that old Space Marines could have. The Sisters of Battle are bringing more firepower to the fight than the fucking Space Marines with their vehicles. So, that's dumb. But I guess overall you can say, apart from the fact that the female faces all look horrid, I'm not going to make any disparaging claims about female attractiveness here, but we all have the bar, and the bar is probably set somewhere above Burn Victim for a lot of people. I know, very horrible thing to say, but that's what many of these models look like. The skin doesn't look right. The faces don't look right. If you want to have a really butch, angry-looking chick in power armor, that's fine. But you've got to balance that somehow, and the face needs to look a certain way to pull off that look, which I'm not seeing done, necessarily. That said, whenever they're in full armor, looks great. Some of the characters, again, seem to be taking the role of, like, the old Imperial Confessors and smashing it into the Canoness, going, KISS! And doesn't work for me, personally. But yeah, overall, they look right for the most part. I can say that much with many thumbs up, I guess. They look right. If they reimagined every faction as well as this, there wouldn't be anywhere near the bitching or moaning from the community, or especially this channel. Things like the Chaos Space Marines, I was like, this looks great. Things like the Nurgle Space Marines, I was like, this looks like ass. And mostly not the sculpt, mostly just the whole colour palette they chose. And I freely admit that. But yeah, so Sisters of Battle, overall positive thoughts. However, the Warhammer Old World, this is fucked from the beginning, and I know people are really happy about it, going, oh yeah, they're bringing back Warhammer Fantasy, and it's like, are they? Are they? Again, let's think this through, guys. They can't redo all those factions. They're not just going to pull whole new armies, whole new sculpts out of their ass, and I don't see them bringing back whole ranges of old sculpts, especially ones that have been superseded by new models in Age of Sigmar. I definitely don't see them doing that, because then they're going to be competing with themselves, and they really won't like that. Because they bring out, say, Dwarf Slayers in plastic on square bases. Then the people who are playing Age of Sigmar are going to be like, well, fuck, I can just go buy that Dwarf Slayer army that's way, way cheaper and just rebase them on round bases instead of buying these really expensive Age of Sigmar models, for example. Games Workshop won't like that, so they won't do that. And if they do rules and that, I don't see them releasing all the rules at once. I see them doing a campaign book for a few factions, perhaps, in the old world. and that'll be their big release. But they've made a lot of promises in the past. Look at the Temurkan. They were going to do all the Chaos Gods. There was going to be a book for each god. They did a Nurgle one, the Temurkan book, and that was it. That's as far as they got. So they're full of shit. Absolutely full of shit as a company. And the fact that they're announcing this when they've got so many other projects they haven't finished yet, when really the right time to do this is when people know that a project is finishing up. You say, like, next month is the release of the final book in the Horus Heresy this Horus Heresy series. But don't worry, we already have our next big project coming, and it's, ta-da, Warhammer, the old world. And that's the way you do a reveal. So people are like, oh, I'm disappointed this thing is ending, and I guess that's it for me. Oh my god, I need to do this new thing. That's how you do it. That's how you do a reveal. It's why Marvel puts a stinger at the end of the credits, because they don't just want you to leave the theatre. They want you to leave the theatre looking forward to the next fucking Marvel film. Well, it's the same thing with this. That's when you do it. You don't go, oh, well, you know, we're already looking after Middle-earth, Blood Bowl, Necromunda, fucking Adeptus Titanicus, Aeronautica Imperialis, the Horus Heresy, updating models for Fantasy and for 40k, and we're also going to do Warhammer the Old World, and we assure you we're going to give it 110% effort. Fuck off. Fuck right off. Seriously. And why am I the only one saying this? Is nobody else out there saying, hey, you know, I don't think they can do this. At least not the way we want them to do this. Now again, I'll be the first to admit it if they prove me wrong. Just point back to this video, link it in the comments and go, Macca, you said all these horrible, nasty things about them 3-4 years ago. What have you got to say? And then, well, we'll see. But until then, I'm Macca with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching this video. Look forward to your thoughts and feedback in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.